Well, you mentioned that is a lot of diversity coming to the legislature because it is a citizen legislature.
That's right.
So that's unique to be able to draw upon the experiences that you have outside of the.
That's right, and I think that
General Assembly.
one of the strengths of Virginia's legislature is that we are a citizen legislature. Thomas Jefferson felt very strongly that we maintain this commitment to make laws, but then when we go home, we have to live under the laws in which we're expecting everybody else to live under. And I think that's great. It has its advantages and disadvantages, particularly in a culture now where we're forced to do our work on a part-time basis. But really, the job is more of a full-time job at this point. But the pay, the whopping $17,640 a year that we get paid for this job, particularly in Northern Virginia, you got to have another job, and sometimes the pressures do collide, and it gets a little bit difficult. But it's an honor to be here, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to serve. So I've learned to figure some things out, and some days are better than others, but on the whole, it's good to be here, and we work it out.
Well, you have been busy this session with a number of bills introduced, and you have one introduced I wanted to ask you about, which was House Bill 1615, the Keep Our Promise Act of 2007.
That's right. Well, I filed that bill, I think, for the last 3 years in a row. Of course, last year was the 2006, and the year before that was 2005, but I think that, the majority of a supermajority of the General Assembly made the promise to phase out the car tax. I know when I first ran, and every election since, I've promised to keep that commitment to get rid of the car tax. And unfortunately, while a majority of members have made that promise, a majority of members haven't fulfilled that promise or elected to keep that promise. So I decided to call it like it is, the Keep Our Promise Act of 2007. I think it's important that we keep our promises to the people that elected us when we stood before them and asked them for their votes. I think, unfortunately, too often that when politicians are standing before the people asking for their trust and electing them to government, that when they're safely elected, unfortunately, forget those promises. So I called this bill like it is, the Keep Our Promise Act of 2007. I think it's one of the most prominent promises that so many people in state government have made over the last decade or so. And I think we need to fulfill that promise, not only because we made that promise, but also I think it will get us a step closer to people having a greater trust in their government.
Great. How about your House Bill 2446, which relates to the workforce housing?
Right. Well, in Prince William and a lot of localities in Virginia, we have a problem of, say, teachers and police officers and firefighters that unfortunately aren't able to live in the community in which they're working.
Right.
And so we want to do everything that we can, and this bill was a partnership with the Prince William County Board of Supervisors that both I'm involved with, as well as Delegate Miller and as well as Senator Toddy Puller. She has the companion bill that I filed in the Senate. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to create more opportunities for local government, more flexibility to offer programs to police and firefighters and teachers and others that serve the public, so that we can do more to encourage and make the resources available for them to be able to live in the communities in which they're working.
Great. And your other bill, which was House Bill 2556, relating to textbooks in public schools. Yeah.
Well, it might surprise you to learn that in some places, in some schools, in some classroom, their students aren't allowed to bring their textbooks home. And so last year I had some complaints from a number of parents in my district, as well as some teachers actually, that their kids can't bring their textbooks home. And one of the biggest problems that we have when I go around and visit schools, I try to visit every school in my district as often as possible. I've actually gone so far as to be a teacher's aide for a couple days in our schools. I really want to do everything I can, because I'm not a teacher, but I serve on the education committee, and I want to do everything I can to get as close to the trenches as I can, to know firsthand what's going on. I actually have an education advisory committee composed of teachers and an administrator to kind of give me information directly and feedback directly on the state of education in Prince William and the Commonwealth at large. But anyway, I actually remember a time I was speaking at a government class at one of my high schools, and I was in passing I said, when you take your textbooks home, and the kids kind of looked at me funny and scratched their head and say, Mr. Frederick, we can't take our textbooks home. And I said, wait a second, this isn't good. But one of the complaints that I hear most often from schools about when they're talking about the challenges of educating kids today is the lack of parental involvement. And when you have parents that do want to get involved and want their kids to bring their schoolwork home so that they can help them study, or if you have kids that need their parents to help them, we want to do everything we can to encourage that.
Sure.
And the fact that some classes and some schools aren't letting their children, their students take textbooks home, I just can't believe that. I mean, I remember when I was a student that I got extra credit for taking my book home and covering it up with a brown paper bag so it wouldn't get damaged, and so I just can't imagine that that we're not letting students take their textbooks home so they can study. So I filed this legislation to do that. We got it out of the House. Unfortunately, the Senate didn't agree with, strangely enough, with letting kids take their textbooks home.
We were talking earlier, and we were chatting, how my daughter took her textbook home, but she forgot to bring it back to school.
That's right.
So maybe we need to add a provision to bring it back to school if you get to take it home.